Hello, everyone. Thank you all for joining us today. I hope all the attendees have a great time networking with your peers on the networking tables. A very good afternoon to all of you. I am Vishali, welcoming you all on behalf of Solar Quarter and First View Group to our today's webinar on how can Africa create a revenue stream from its carbon credit market to achieve its net zero transition goal. So, before today's proceeding, I take this opportunity to thank and welcome our partner for this event, EKI Energy Services Private Limited. So now we will be playing a sponsor video. Thank you for sponsor video. Although Africa is the least polluting country in the world, its rapidly growing economy and bold development goals means that it will see a significant increase in energy consumption over the next few decades. It is therefore essential that global climate goals are achieved by ensuring that the African continent's future development path aligns with the equitable energy transition. This net zero transition will be expensive for the continent. Thus, in order to achieve net zero goals, Africa requires innovative new climate finance such as the carbon credit market. In this webinar, EKI International, a global market leader in the end to end carbon market solution providers, will present a comprehensive overview of Africa's carbon credit marketplace, its challenges and its opportunities, as well as roadmap for the future. Also, I would like to make a small announcement here. I would request all the attendees to kindly post their questions in the Q&A box and we will be answering them after the presentation. Now, I would like to give a short intro about the presenter of the day. He is a senior general manager at EKI Energy Service Limited and is responsible for business development in the region of Africa, Southeast Asia, and Europe. He has been with EKI Energy Service Limited for almost a year now and has worked in heavy engineering and supply chain prior to this. He holds a master degree from the Indian Institute of Management, Raipur, and has graduated in chemical engineering from Maulana Azad National Institute of Technology, Bhopal. He is none other than Mr. Siddharth Gupta. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for him. Huge personality present amongst us. And now, without any further delay, let's begin our session. Welcome to the screen, sir.
Right. Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Vaishali. Thanks for this overwhelming, welcome to this event. And we appreciate the opportunity that Solar Quarter has provided to EK Energy Services Limited, and especially to me to present on what can be done in Africa in coming times, and how the African economy and the African dream of having a net zero climate there can work on. So, without any further delay, I would just start with the presentation, and the presentation flow would just be shared with you. I would request all the participants to kindly make a note of all the queries that they have, as Vaishali ma'am has just said. and we'll take up those queries post the presentation. I hope my screen is visible to everyone.
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Thank you. So, the topic for today is how Africa could create revenue stream from its carbon credit market. So, this would be the brief agenda of discussion. We'll start with what is climate change, what are carbon markets and types of carbon markets. We'll move on to carbon markets in Africa. We'll move on to carbon finance in general, and then how this can play out in Africa. And finally, we will move to some specific focus areas like community-based project. We would just take the example of improved efficiency cook stoves here to tell you what these type of cook stoves can do for the general public and the economy in view of the carbon markets and the role that they play in developing the credits in a specific geography. So climate change refers to long-term shifts in temperatures and weather patterns, and this has been accelerated greatly in a degenerative way since the 1800s, post the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution, with its advent, brought about burning of fossil fuels like coal, gas, and oil, and this has led to degradation of the natural quality of environment because of aggregation of greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide, nitrous oxides, and other gases which contribute to global warming. Burning of fossil fuel generates greenhouse gases, and they act like as a blanket wrapped around the earth, trapping the sun's heat and raising temperatures. Now, carbon credit is a generic term for any tradable certificate or permit representing the right to emit a set amount of carbon dioxide, which is 1 ton of carbon dioxide or the equivalent amount of different greenhouse gas. So I'll just try to explain what a carbon credit is. This is very elementary. Whenever there is emission of 1 ton of carbon dioxide in an atmosphere, it would lead to an equivalent of one offset or one carbon credit. Now, if there's any technology that lets us reach the final goal and helps us reduce the emission by the same amount, that is 1 ton of carbon dioxide, it would constitute to one carbon credit. A classic example here would be renewable energy. So most of the energy demand in the world is met by fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas. So suppose a country requires 100 gigawatt of electricity for its day-to-day needs for general public and industries. And most of this is coming from the fossil fuels. Now, if any additional investment is being made so that this energy is generated from renewable sources, then it leads to avoidance of this carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. The end result would remain the same, that electricity would be produced, but this would require additional investments and additional efforts. To compensate these additional investments or of efforts, carbon finance comes into picture through carbon credits. So if suppose the same electricity is being produced, but 100,000 tons of carbon dioxide emission is avoided, then 100,000 tons of carbon credits are produced during the course of this activity. So this is how carbon credits are produced through avoidance. The other way to produce credits is sequestration. An example here could be the natural sinks like the mangroves or the forests. So these setups have, traditionally absorbed carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, and there have been technological advancements and there have been technologies like biochar creation which have helped in sequestration of carbon from the atmosphere so that the free carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases in the atmosphere are sequestered and they do not lead to the global warming through the greenhouse gas effect. So, this is a brief on carbon credits. Essentially, one carbon credit is equal to the reduction in terms of emission or sequestration of 1 ton of carbon dioxide or its equivalent. Offsets is interchangeably used with carbon dioxide for quite some time now. Offsets are carbon credits which are used as instruments for trading between organizations or countries. The carbon credit regime came into existence through the Kyoto Protocol. The Kyoto Protocol is an international treaty from 1997. This was formulated and brought into existence by United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change through their Clean Development Mechanism. The Kyoto Protocol came into force after 55 parties, including the Annex 1 countries, which is around 37 countries, accounting for 55% of total carbon dioxide emission in 1990, deposited their instruments of ratification, acceptance, approval, or accession. What this essentially meant was people came together, especially spearheaded by the developed countries, and they said that the emission of carbon dioxide and equivalent greenhouse gases is leading to degradation in natural quality of environment at a very rapid pace, which would lead to an average increase of temperature of Earth by 2 degrees Celsius. And this was the cause of concern. The countries together took the initiative to reduce the emission of greenhouse gases to 1990 levels. And this was done to ensure that the increase in temperature does not breach the 1.5 degrees Celsius mark. Now, currently, 190 countries and one regional economic integration organization, that is the EEC, have deposited instruments of ratifications, accessions, approvals, or acceptances. The protocol entered into force on 16th February 2005, though it was formulated in 1997. The Kyoto Protocol was in essence replaced by the Paris Agreement in 2015 with the introduction of Article 6.2, which essentially meant that the developed countries could directly invest in host countries so that the carbon avoidance technology or instruments can be developed there, thereby making sure that the investments get the maximum benefits in terms of carbon dioxide emission or sequestration. This is, a rough framework for the Kyoto Protocol. The Kyoto Protocol established three market-based mechanisms designed to ensure that the industrialized countries, the Annex 1 countries, as I just said, around 37 of them, meet emission reduction targets. The first one was the joint implementation. This allows Annex 1 countries accounting for carbon emission that are generated by investing in projects in other Annex 1 countries. So if suppose there's a developed country, the next one country like say the United Kingdom, they want to implement a program in France. Uh, they as a country or companies or organizations based out of that country can invest in technologies or projects in other Annex 1 countries and can participate in the carbon reduction program. Then there was the carbon CDM, the Clean Development Mechanism. This allows projects in non-Annex 1 countries to sell their reductions to Annex 1 countries, helping them to meet their reduction targets. So what happens here is, suppose there's a country, again, just for the sake of example, suppose United Kingdom wants to reduce their carbon emission, and they are taking their best foot forward for this particular thing, and they are able to achieve carbon reduction to some extent through investment in their own country, and they feel that subsequent investments would not yield the desired results, then they can go into developing countries or underdeveloped countries and invest in their projects there and can buy credits so that they are able to reach their own targets, and this leads to reduction of emission globally. Then obviously there were international emissions trading, allows the purchase of and sale of emissions among parties included in Annex 1 to the UNFCCC to fulfill their commitments. As far as the current scenario on carbon market is concerned, carbon market in reality is a diverse set of systems that are regulated in different jurisdictions for trading greenhouse gas pollution rights. So carbon markets are basically based on the principle of cap and trade, which essentially means that any organization or any country would try their level best to reduce their own emissions, and beyond a certain extent, when they feel that the economic muscle or the effort that is being put in does not yield substantial reductions of emissions, then they are going to buy credits from other projects based out of different organizations or other countries, so that the credits are deeply rewarded, and the organizations or the countries which are undertaking such projects are rewarded accordingly for the additional investment or effort that they are putting in. Carbon credits are similar to permits but are fundamentally different in the way that they are generated over time. In many markets, these carbon credits can be used in lieu of allowances for compliance to targets that have been placed on industrial facilities or sovereign countries. What this means is, suppose if there is a company or an organization in a developed nation like any of the European countries, then they would have essentially a permit to emit carbon dioxide for the kind of operations that they are carrying out. Just for the sake of example, if there's a car manufacturing company based out of Germany, then for say 100 cars that they manufacture, they might have a trading or the emission cap of X tons of carbon dioxide. If they are emitting more than X tons of carbon dioxide, they would be subjected to taxes. And to reduce this emission, they would have to improve their technology. But if suppose that is not possible or is not financially viable, they can buy these credits from other organizations which are reducing carbon dioxide, which is lesser than their allocated quota. Uh, Conversely, the organizations which emit carbon dioxide, which is lower than their allowed quota, would have the advantage of selling those credits to other organizations and thus getting rewarded in terms of carbon finance for the technological development and the efforts that they have put in. A few points on the importance of carbon markets. Carbon markets are created to protect the planet and to preserve nature. It is just a market mechanism, open market mechanism that ensures that the allocation of resources is done in such a way that the entire world is benefited in terms of maximum emission avoidance or sequestration possible. So, since this is an open market mechanism, every producer or every country would try to invest in technologies which have the maximum impact. So suppose if a $10 investment in Europe would lead to just avoidance of 1 ton of carbon dioxide, and a $10 investment would lead to a 100 ton reduction of carbon dioxide in a developing country in Southeast Asia, then it would make all the more sense to put in that $10 in Southeast Asia globally. And this is how this open market mechanism works. Carbon markets are regulated through tradable instruments that are offsets, which monitor the emission of greenhouse gases. Greenhouse gases have different potency. So, for example, 1 ton of carbon dioxide is equal to one offset or one carbon credit. But if the emission avoidance of 1 ton of methane is done, or 1 ton of methane is sequestered, it would lead to generation of 24 carbon credits or offsets, because methane would have 24 times the potency of carbon dioxide. The carbon credits or offsets traded in the market give rights to buyers through purchase of credits to emit certain amounts of GHG gases, which may have resulted from their projects in same or different region. So again, going through the example of the car manufacturer in Europe, if they had, say, a quota of 100,000 tons of carbon dioxide for their manufacturing plant, and they were generating 110,000 tons of carbon dioxide, they would have purchased 10,000 tons of carbon dioxide to just stay within the limits. Through the market, though the markets were primarily driven by offsets generated from renewable energy sources, alternative tech and nature-based credits are now the driver in the change. So preliminarily, we had seen that renewable energy was the biggest generator of carbon credits globally because the adoption rates were low and the technology was very expensive. But now they have found a wide acceptance across the globe, and so the credits generated from alternative tech and nature-based credits have gained prominence because these are the projects which actually require carbon financing for their sustenance and development. The system has emerged as one of the most potent weapons against climate change. Now, types of carbon market. The carbon markets are broadly divided into compliance markets and voluntary carbon markets. Compliance markets are created as a result of any national, regional, or international policy or regulatory requirement. And a classic example here would be European Union emission trading scheme, wherein each country has got its quota of carbon emission, and each organization within the country has got their quota depending on the national quota and also depending on the activity that they are undertaking. Uh, Beyond, if this limit, there is emission of carbon dioxide from these organizations, these are penalized in terms of levying of carbon tax. Voluntary carbon markets can be national, can be international. They refer to the issuance, buying, and selling of carbon credits on a voluntary basis. So, for example, just again taking the case of that automobile manufacturer, which was producing 110,000 tons of carbon dioxide. If the limit was 100,000 tons, then they would have to buy 10,000 tons of carbon dioxide equivalents, that is 10,000 credits, to agree or adhere to the compliance markets. But beyond that, if they take uh, a pledge themselves for net zero, or they want to even improve, then the underlying condition of 100,000 tons of carbon dioxide equivalents, then they can buy the credits from voluntary markets and can voluntarily give their share uh, to the globe in terms of improvement of environment and their fair share for carbon crisis management. This is a brief uh, comparison between the compliance and voluntary market. The compliance market would work on cap and trade, whereas the voluntary market is a free market where everyone can either buy or sell carbon credits depending on their capacity and their will. The unit type would be 1 ton of carbon dioxide. In both the cases, the fungibility would be homogeneous products. So, in case if we are talking of a compliance market, uh, if somebody is buying 1 ton of carbon dioxide there in terms of an offset, it should be from a similar technology that they are using for their own production. Whereas voluntary markets can have varied vintage, varied co-production, varied characteristics. Examples of compliance market can be Euro ETS, China ETS, and so on and so forth. Voluntary carbon credits market is mainly led by VERs from Vera or GS and so on and so forth. The current pricing would can go up to 85 USD per metric ton, that is per offset, in European allowances in EU ETS, whereas in voluntary markets it may go up to $10 and even beyond, depending on the technology, vintage, and rarity of that particular carbon credit. So now we come to the crux of the matter, that is opportunity for voluntary market in Africa. Africa is at the moment one of the world's largest generators of nature-based credits and community-based credits, and has huge potential for renewal-based and alternative tech credits as well. So Africa, with its nature endowed, forest cover and green cover, has been one of the huge or one of the major generators of nature-based credits. And with the community upliftment projects aided by the Western world, the community-based credits have also picked up in Africa. Now, with the industrialization reaching to almost all the countries of Africa and the African Alliance trying to do their best to ensure that they generate maximum from their available resources. They can also be a huge participant in credits generated from renewable based technology or alternative technology. Formulation of a voluntary carbon market in Africa shall ensure access of easy capital through carbon finance for project developers across domains, while ensuring that the more fortunate countries, companies can have access to quality credits. What this means is, suppose if there's an entrepreneur in Kenya who would want to set up a renewable energy setup of say 50 megawatts, and they're finding it difficult to arrange for finance for that kind of a project, they can definitely look at monetizing the carbon credits generated out of that project in the voluntary carbon market. And this would ensure that this kind of project is put up in Kenya without degrading the natural quality of environment, bringing in more industrialization, improving the lifestyle and living standards of people, and also ensuring that whosoever is buying those credits from a huge multinational corporation or from a huge country, they are getting access to these kind of credits, which are very valuable to the overall sustainable development of the entire community. With a growing number of companies committing to net zero goals, interest in voluntary carbon markets as a means of meeting these ambitions is only going to grow from here. Now, talking about challenges of voluntary market in Africa, the biggest challenge is each standard establishes its own eligibility criteria for projects that it registers. So there are multiple voluntary market, registries that are working across the globe. Chief of them being Vera, working in their VCS, generating VCUs, and then there is Gold Standard. Now CDM has stopped taking projects from developing countries. They're still, issuing credits up to 2020 from their existing registered projects. And then there have been upcoming registries like the Global Carbon Council, which is based out of Qatar and is backed by the Qatar government. So these registries would have different eligibility criteria for projects. So just for the sake of example, if there is Vera, which would take projects up to 2 years in retrospect, Gold Standard might take projects only till 1 year in retrospect. Gold Standard would not, accept registration of renewable energy projects under certain criteria, and Vera has stopped taking renewable energy projects which are on grid in any case whatsoever. So there are, differences in the eligibility criteria of these projects, and so a standard protocol or a standard mechanism is not available, which can ensure that the kind of project or the kind of credits are standardized. There's no transfer of credits from one registry to another. So if the credits are generated in Vera, they would be retired in Vera, and so on and so forth for other registries as well. There's no sole body governing the credits. So these are internationally tradable credits, and the carbon finance would flow into geographies or regions which have promising potential rather than the inherent demand. So, just for the sake of example, if suppose there is a country A and a country B, and if the country B is politically more stable, has got better industrialization, then it is bound to receive more carbon finance in terms of credits that are being sold from that country as compared to, say, another country A, which is almost similar to country B in all other aspects, but say is not politically that stable. So, since this is not governed by any governing body, this cannot ensure that it is equally or equitably distributed across all the beneficiaries. The markets have limited transparency, and the awareness related to environmental attributes being available as tradable instruments is very limited. So, this brings me to one of my personal experiences wherein I was sitting with the regulatory authority of one of the African countries. And when I told them that even the credits from projects that have been commissioned as far back as last 2 years can be generated, and credits can be available in retrospective effect. They were not aware of it, and once they got to know about it, they mobilized their efforts, and eventually the credits could be generated. So there has been limited awareness in various pockets of Africa, which has led to loss of such opportunities, and obviously the transparency has been limited, and so the end beneficiaries have sometimes been left wanting in terms of what actually they deserve, and what kind of final share of the total carbon finance reaches them. The market is largely unregulated, leading to limited access to quality credits. So it's not just at the seller's end or the producer's end that the carbon credits market is inefficient. It is also for the buyers, because a lot of buyers would not have access to smaller projects or smaller potential projects which might be based out of the far-flung areas of Africa, but maybe the ones that would be bringing about the maximum change in the livelihood of people. Now, just a brief on the compliance market in Africa. There has been a carbon tax that has been levied in South Africa. A lot of other countries have also been coming up. So, parties to Paris Agreement had accorded their acceptance to try their level best to bring down temperatures by 1.5 degrees Celsius to pre-industrialized levels. This was according to the Paris Agreement in 2015 by Annex 1 countries. Carbon allowances and cap and trade could provide downside protection and enhance risk adjusted returns in scenarios involving immediate or delayed climate actions. Globally, there is no sole body which governs this. To combat this limitation, various emission trading systems have come in existence, and a few are in the process of formalization. So, as I was telling you, there was the South Africa carbon tax system. The South African carbon tax system came into effect in June 2019. The carbon tax prices for a ton of CO2 emissions from large businesses, industry or power or transport sectors was initially set, if I'm not wrong, at around 120 rands, which was then increased to, I suppose, 144 rands. And this ensured that the polluting industries or businesses were penalized in terms of the carbon tax that was levied on them if they were breaching the upper cap, and this could in turn help the companies or businesses which were doing their best by investing money and efforts in improving their systems so as to ensure that they fall within the limits. The Botswana carbon tax is under consideration, and the Moroccan carbon tax is also under consideration. The renewable energy projects uh, in Morocco are now giving out their credits necessarily to the government, compulsorily to the government, to ensure that the government is able to reach their NDC, which is nationally determined contribution. So this is something that is shaping up in Africa already. Now, the carbon finance, as has been used so many times in the presentation so far, is an innovative funding tool that places a financial value on carbon emission and allows companies wishing to offset their own emissions to buy carbon credits earned from sustainable projects. This allows for the financing of innovative projects that brings sustainable energy solutions to people living in developing countries worldwide. So again, this is in essence the definition of carbon finance. This is nothing but just the trading of offsets across the globe so that the companies, organizations, or countries or businesses invest in other countries or businesses for their innovative projects, for their efforts, for their investments, so as to have carbon credits from them, and also to ensure that there is a sustainable development across the globe and the emissions across the globe get reduced. Now, talking about the role of carbon finance in Africa, this allows projects to access expected volumes and revenue streams from offsets ahead of commissioning or at start of operations. So what happens is, suppose, again, going by the example of a renewable energy plant that is to be set up in a country like, say, Kenya, they can register themselves for carbon credits. And once they get themselves registered, there is a revenue stream that can be showed in the cash flows of the company, against which they would be provided funding, because the funding organizations would also have faith and trust in the project, because they know that this cash flow stream is going to start once the project start generating electricity. Another means of obtaining upfront financing secured against carbon revenues. A lot of financial organizations have started taking carbon revenues as a part of the legitimate revenue stream from the project, and thus giving out upfront financing for projects that have the potential to generate carbon credits. This can also be used to refinance projects, thus freeing up resources for development of new projects. So what it essentially means is, suppose if there's a project of 50 megawatt of electricity that has been set up initially, and within, say, 5 years, it reaches its break even, the project can then still generate carbon credits depending on which registry protocol it has registered itself in, for another 10 years or 15, 16 years. And this revenue stream would then help the same company or organization to set up further plants like this, thus ensuring that the process does not stop, and the chain reaction that has been set in motion continues to ensure sustainable development. Carbon financing is a great way to boost the financial viability of cutting edge projects to give them a longer life and less government interference. Classic example here in case would be green hydrogen. Now, green hydrogen is touted as the fuel of the future, and if the projects of green hydrogen have a carbon financing going with them, then obviously these high tech, high investment projects would get a new life and would be widely and quickly accepted across the globe. It can also generate an added revenue stream. Again, the added revenue stream along with whatever the project was set out to do. In case of a renewable project, it was set out to generate electricity and earn money from it. And accordingly, there were other things for other projects. But then carbon revenue adds to the additional revenue stream, and then makes the project even more viable. It provides a medium of leveraging new public-private investment so that the investment kitty inflates and can help in projects to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, allowing all to contribute. So, since the investments now are backed by additional revenue stream, the investments are made in a higher number, both by public and private partners, and this overall increases and improves the overall scale of operations of sustainable projects. So now I'm coming down to an example of carbon financing in Africa through improved efficiency cook stoves. This is one of the projects that even EKI Energy Services Limited has started to undertake in Africa. We have already been doing this in India. So just to give a backdrop of it, every day 3 billion people globally cook food using less efficient and polluting means. That is, they would essentially use a three-stone burner or a stove, which would have an efficiency of 7 to 8%. Uh, and this would cost 4 million lives per year, including infants, due to occupational lung diseases. about 100 million people rely on inefficient traditional cookstoves. Now, what we have started doing, and a lot of other investors from the developing and developed world are doing, is replacing these traditional means by improved efficiency cook stoves, which will reduce fuel consumption by up to 32%. uh, this will in turn reduce the greenhouse gas emission and increase the green cover, because if less amount of wood or biomass is required to cook the same amount of food, owing to the better efficiency of the cook stove, the one that is just shown below in the slide, this would increase the green cover because less number of trees would have to be cut to prepare the same quantum of food. This is time saving due to reduced firewood consumption. So if the natural traditional method of three stone burner use 2 hours to cook food, this can prepare food in around 45 minutes, which ensures that there is substantial time saved for the mother in the house to take care of the household and the children. This also reduces direct smoke while cooking. This is the potential for improved cook stoves in Africa. This is the clean cooking percentage. You can see this is abysmally low, and most of the countries are even less than 10% in terms of clean cooking penetration. So cook stoves like these can be deployed, which would generate carbon credits because of their efficiency and because of their ability to use lesser fuel. And this would generate carbon credits, and these carbon credits can then be traded with the Western world or the developed countries, and this would bring in revenue to uh, you know uh, ensure that even more such projects are undertaken. And again, this sets up a chain reaction, ensuring that the livelihood of the general population improves, and also the living standard improves across the region. So this is just one example. This is one small step that even EKI is taking ahead, and we are committed to setting up of at least 500,000 cook stove in next 12 months in Africa itself. This was all from my end, and we can open the session for queries or questions.
So should we take the questions?
Yes, so I'll just take the questions from the chat first, and then if something still stays, then I'm not sure whether this
Uh,
platform has the option of one-on-one talks. If it is there, then we can definitely
no,
use
sir.
that.
I can just post the questions here on the stage. 1 second. So
Sure.
the question is, can one apply for carbon credits after completion of a renewable energy project?
Yes, it can be done. It depends on the registry protocol. So ideally, up to 1 year at least after the completion of the renewable energy project, it would be eligible for gold standard or Vera if it is in a least developed country, and if it is not in a least developed country or a landlocked least developed country, then it can be only taken up by gold standard in case the penetration of that particular kind of renewable energy on the national grid is less than 5%. So these are a few conditions that need to be checked out. Beyond this, yes, there are protocols like Global Carbon Council, which can accept such projects under their A3 mechanism or A1 mechanism.
Okay. Next question is, are the compliance credits sourced from voluntary markets?
So compliance credits and voluntary credits go hand in hand. Voluntary credits are traded across the geography and across the nations, whereas compliance credits would be confined to a particular geography. A classic case would be if suppose there are credits produced in the confined space of European Union emission trading scheme, and there is a buyer in the same space, then they would be more than willing to buy this kind of a credit rather than voluntary credit, because they have to avoid the carbon tax. And so the mechanics and financials of both the things would act in such a way that compliance credits get consumed in the same geography, and beyond that, if somebody has a voluntary pledge or a voluntary target, then they can source voluntary credits from wherever they feel like.
Okay. Uh, so the next question is, when we have renewables energy certificates for renewables energy projects, why do we need credit in addition?
So renewable energy certificates are another kind of environmental energy attributes. These are just like carbon credits. The only difference being renewable energy certificates can, offset only scope 2 emissions, whereas carbon credits offset scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions. A project across the globe can generate only one of these two, either RECs or carbon credits in a specific period of time. So, just for the sake of example, suppose there is a 50 megawatt renewable energy project in somewhere in Bangalore, right? And we are trying to generate the attributes from it in, say, the year 2019. Then it can either generate carbon credits or renewable energy certificates, and whatever it generates, then it can get traded. So this is for a specific duration. So you generate, say, suppose REC is in 2019, you can definitely go and generate carbon credits in 2020 if the project is registered with a carbon credit registry or protocol. There's no concern on that.
Okay. So he has some addition on the question. Also, when it comes to renewable energy projects, which are self-sustainable with the revenue that they get from the renewable energy. So, how does the credits bring a positive change here?
Right. So this is a very valid question, and I had answered one of the questions almost 40 minutes ago, and I had said that the focus has now shifted from renewable energy to alternative tech like EVs, green hydrogen, improved efficiency cook stores, and nature-based solutions. And this is for the simple reason that now even the buyers and the developers realize that the renewable energy projects have their IRR being met through the revenue stream from electricity generation itself, right? And so their acceptability in terms of buyers wanting to buy those credits has also decreased. Your question is absolutely right there. These would have a lesser demand in coming future, and projects which have innovative cutting edge technology or which are difficult to manage and maintain would have higher demand and thus higher potential in the market for monetization in coming times.
So the next question is any subsidiary of EKI Energy planning for a separate IPO like Amrut or cooking project?
So I suppose I would not be actually able to comment on this on an open forum. But that being said, we are closely working on these projects and we are trying to scale them up. Uh, we are not looking at another IPO in the near future, but the market would be made aware of it whenever we decide to.
Okay. So the next question is, when the stoves are deployed, how are they monitored to determine the actual carbon credits produced? Do you use IoT for this?
So Internet of Things is not being used currently for this particular purpose, because then it makes the cook stove so expensive that the free of cost deployment, the model that we are working on right now, we do not charge even a single penny from the end beneficiary. We produce it, we distribute it, and all the costs are being taken up by EKI Energy Services Limited, and this is funded through the carbon finance. If we involve IoT, definitely the monitoring would improve, but this would increase the cost to an extent where the entire project would become financially less feasible. That being said, we are working on technology which reduces the cost And if at all the costs come down to an extent where we can deploy it in a financially feasible manner, we'll definitely do it.
Okay. Uh, he added, and can existing farms start a carbon credit program or join one if they plant pecan trees?
The I mean, nature-based credits are generated from projects which have the additionality criteria met, right? Additionality criteria is a general criteria actually for all the carbon credit programs. We'll have to check if the trees are being planted in a region which did not originally have any vegetation cover, and if there were extra efforts in terms of money and time that were being put to get these trees together. If that was the case, then yes, they can be considered. But just by clearing of farmland or clearing of forest, if such trees are put up, it would not it would not result in any carbon credit generation.
Okay, sir. Next question is, what is the process of getting access to carbon financing for private companies, and does it need to go through government organizations?
Right, fair enough. So this is an interesting question. Yes, the carbon financing is facilitated by companies like EKI, though we are one of the world's largest. There are other companies also in the market, and we act as end-to-end asset management consultant for carbon credits. So we identify projects, get them registered, get the issuance of credits done, and trade them as well, so that the end project owner gets the monetization benefit. As far as the government intervention is concerned, currently there is no intervention in Africa except for South Africa, where the ETS has been established. So any project from any place in Africa, except for South Africa and obviously the renewable energy projects in Morocco, can go ahead and claim credits and benefit from monetization there.
Okay. Next question is, if India launch a compliance market next year, say for example, will India source the compliance credits from CDM voluntary based out of India?
So it actually depends on the government, right? They can have a compliance market here, but then when they do so, they'll have to essentially mention as to which credits would be traded in the compliance market. They can be the CDM credits tagged with VS or GS, or they can just be the CDM credits. But whatever the case may be, it would then be decided by the government and its jurisdiction.
Okay. So the next question is, what is the process to verify a project and buy a carbon credit?
Okay, so the process to verify a project is, a lengthy one, to be very honest. It takes somewhere between 6 to 18 months, depending on the project's nature, the geography, and the registry that we are trying to take it to. My email ID, I'll just type it down here. We can definitely talk on case to case basis here, because it would be very difficult to enlist everything or discuss all the steps that are involved. And even for buying of carbon credits, yes, you can buy it through a few internet exchanges that exist across the globe, or you can talk to consulting companies like ours if the demand is of a higher number.
The next question is, what are the actual average carbon credit price for solar projects?
Okay, this varies greatly. Again, depends on where the project is, what's the size of the project, what's the technology, whether it is solar PV, it's solar CSP, and so on and so forth. And obviously the registry and vintage that also play a major role. But ideally, it can be assumed safely that the price would range anywhere from $1 to $7 to $8 for a solar credit across the globe at this point in time, across registries and across vintages.
Okay, so one of the participant has written, I am shocked by the statistics on cook stoves for Uganda. I always thought the penetration was high. What can be done to increase the penetration?
So, the local organizations in terms of the NGOs and stuff have to come forward. We are also actively looking forward for getting associated with manufacturers and, distributors in Uganda. Again, my email ID is there. If you wish to join us in any capacity, you can definitely write into me. We would be happy to undertake such projects in Uganda. And similarly, a lot of awareness has come in the developing and developed world, and a lot of companies are trying to put up projects there. We are expected to go live in the first quarter of calendar year of 2023 in Uganda, and we would appreciate any support in this manner in any front.
So we have some more questions added in the Q&A section. So I'll just read it for you. India has high number of CDM projects. What the future of those CDM credits?
Oh, very difficult to say, right? CDM has not, confirmed on issuance post 2020, and CDM had stopped accepting fresh projects in India post 2019. So, CDM was pivotal in setting forth a resolution in terms of, carbon trading. It was the first mechanism. But as we see it now, things would be more on the other mechanisms. Action would be there, but then nonetheless, everything would be guided by what CDM had set forward. Because even today, most of the methodologies that other protocols are using are the ones that have been accepted and used on CDM.
Okay. So next question is, can the government launch a voluntary carbon market like they do with compliance? If they do so, will it negatively impact your company?
So the beauty of voluntary market is it cannot be governed by a government, or it cannot be put into any jurisdiction, right? If at all a market is put up into any kind of jurisdiction, then it comes under compliance market. So by the definition, the very definition of it, a compliance market cannot be regulated by a government, and so obviously since it cannot be done, it would not impact any company whatsoever.
So I think this is the last question. When will the COP finalize the agreements for the developed countries to mandatorily buy credits from developing countries?
See, again, nobody can be made to buy credits from any other country until and unless the countries are under Agreement 6.2, or there are NDCs that have been undertaken by the countries. I'll just give you an example since this is the last question. So, suppose Switzerland and Ghana are working together on Article 6.2. So what happens is if there's a polluting organization in Switzerland which is exceeding its quota of carbon emissions there and is not able to source carbon credits to offset the excess emissions that they are doing there, they can invest in a project in Ghana and then buy credits from there. So this is already active, but this is on country to country basis, and this is bilateral in nature. Making it universal is difficult, and this would essentially come under the purview of voluntary market rather than compliance market.
That's it, sir. So you want to give any concluding remarks before I say thanks to everyone?
Right. It was great interacting with all of you, and really intrigued by the questions that you asked. And I'm really thankful to Solar Quarter for organizing this event. And we are looking forward to helping out businesses across the globe, specifically the people and communities in Africa, because we feel that they have been long due for the help and support that they should have got through these movements, these universal movements, these global movements. We'll try our little best to increase our penetration there. And I've shared my email ID. If there are any further queries, if there are any concerns, if there is any thing that you would want to know on the African market, I'm definitely just one mail away.
Siddhanta, you were impressively well prepared and extremely professional in the way you kept us all the height of our attention for almost an hour. Thank you everyone for extending your time and support for the event. We promise you to come back with more exciting topics very soon. The floor is now open for networking. Thank you everyone. Thank you, Siddhanta.
Thank you.